And back now here at the KFYR Plus News Desk, and Gen Z is already feeling a bit burned out, with many young professionals feeling immense pressure to constantly be on and be productive. Unlike previous generations who may have been willing to sacrifice personal time for the sake of career advancement, Gen Z places a high value on work-life balance and personal fulfillment. A new trend in the workplace is called micro-retiring. And here to help us better understand is Paul Peters, a business owner, best-selling author, and host of the podcast On Purpose with Paul Peters. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for taking some time today.
Good afternoon, Jay. How are you?
Doing great, thank you. So, Paul, can you explain what micro-retirement is, how it differs from traditional retirement?
Yeah, it's typically, taking some time off. It could be short term, could be long term to focus on what is valuable or important to you at the time. I was thinking about this in preparation. The Gen Z, basically, I want to say the age is 2002, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So range from 12-year-old to 28 years old. They grew up during the heavy technological age of the early 2000s. They
Mm-hmm.
also, many of their teen years or early 20s were during the COVID, so they experienced heightened restrictions in regards to also an increase in mental health awareness. And so it's really put the focus on, do I want to be in an environment that's going to create more stress on my mental health, or do I want to take ownership of my mental health, and i.e. take ownership of the job and career that I choose?
So, what is driving this micro-retirement among the Gen Z workers?
Well, I think I wouldn't say it's widespread, simply because when you think of retirement, you've got to have the financial
Sure.
sufficiency to be able to do that. Most people can't afford that. And so I don't know necessarily if that's a situation where their parents are able to take care of them, but the focus is more on what's valuable to them. If they can afford to take that time off, they're putting more of a focus on a balanced work-life balance per se. Some of them are taking short term, going to explore whatever's important to them, hiking, different things. Some of them are taking long term. I just had a conversation with one of my staff who took some time off, and I told her the door's always open because she was a great staff, and we're welcoming her back. So I think owners need to be a little sensitive and open to those situations. What I have done is not necessarily putting a position that is vital, because if you want somebody who's going to take a micro retirement, you're left in a bind. But it's very
Mm-hmm.
open for contract type work or short term type work, which would be very open for folks who are looking to explore a micro retirement.
So, are bosses miscalculating how much Gen Z employees value work life balance these days?
I think they are, to be honest with you. A lot of business owners are they're like driven by the dollar. One of the things that I have discovered when we ended, because I work in the mental health field, I work with folks with intellectual disabilities, substance abuse, mental health. We ended up going to complete remote simply because of the health and safety of the clients that we support. So we have a semi-remote. So I've had to be very sensitive to the that kind of environment that many of my staff. I personally have three Gen Z children, and many of my staff are Gen Z. So trying to be very open. I went ahead and hired some consultants who have a focus on cultural
Mm-hmm.
improvement, and so we've implemented and working on implementing some of those things that's very sensitive to the Gen Z population.
Why do you think they put so much, put so much value on, a work life balance compared to previous generations?
Well, primarily because they're very focused on mental health. Like I said, in a remote COVID environment, mental health skyrocketed. So they're very sensitive to, going through that stress, anxiety, fear, depression, different things like that. And so, and with the increased rate of suicide, I think they're very sensitive and very concerned about what that may look like if they get too stressed in a work environment. So they're basically saying, I'm going to set some boundaries around things that are most important to me. I'm not going to fall into a previous generation like myself. I'm a baby boomer.
Mm-hmm.
The thought was, you go to work, you work as hard as you need to work because you're climbing the corporate ladder. That's not as important to them. They're very much focused on, do I have a good work life balance? Is my mental health where it needs to be? Are my values being considered? Because that's the priority for them. It's not so much about making money, even though that is important. I wouldn't say that that is the driving force of previous generations.
So, what impact does this, taking a micro retirement have on long-term career progressions? It used to be you'd get a job when you were 24, you'd start in the workforce, and you worked 20 years to get to management position. I guess if you're taking micro retirements, what does that do to building that or climbing that corporate ladder?
Well, I think the employers need to be very open and creative on their workforce. It's no longer a typical workforce of full-time people coming in 9 to 5 or different shifts that they're having. They've got to be creative, bringing people in as a consultant or contract, bringing people in temporary, depending on the contracts and kind of work that they do. So, my field, we work with folks with disabilities, and much of it is temporary. Some of it is contract, and so there's a lot of flexibility with the hours. So you can work around people's schedules and what they consider important. Because if you've got folks that are trying to balance their own personal life, you have I think probably one of the first times you have an integration of the personal and vocational coming together, where people may want to take a break and go to Starbucks in the afternoon, whereas previously, no, you're on the clock. And so on the clock is really a vague term now.
Yeah. So, how does this benefit both employees and employers? I know you talked about it in your certain industry,
Yeah.
but overall, how does it benefit both the employees and employers?
Well, one of the things I've shared with before, as an employer, you cannot lower your standard to meet the needs of your staff. There has to be a kind of a give and take. So if I,
Hmm.
as an employer, am being very sensitive to someone who's expressed to me, I'm having, some stressful times. I'm trying to make sure that I'm able to do these things that are important to me. And me as an owner being sensitive, say, well, let's work around, let's carve a creative schedule with you so your needs are being met and my needs are being met. You're going to have a long-term staff who recognizes that the employer is very sensitive to their needs that have been expressed. And I think that's the key. Gen Zs want to feel respected, they want to feel valued, and they want to feel like they're contributing.
Do you foresee this micro retirement becoming a standard practice, and how might the concept of this evolve as Gen Z continues to shape the workforce more and more?
I think probably for a short term, I think people are going to fall into that nice work-life balance. I wouldn't necessarily term it as micro retirement long term. I think is when an employer is sensitive to giving their staff some time off. For me, I've set the priorities: family first, and then work, and that is really um, been great for my culture, for my staff, morale. They recognize if you have a situation where you have a sick family member, you need to stay home because you're a single parent. That really is something that really staff are really responding to.
Yeah. As a business owner, do you see any other trends emerging from the result of Gen Z influence?
Well, I think it's actually kind of a healthy when you have a work-life balance. And also, I'm finding that Gen Zs are being more outspoken on the things that are important to them. One of the things I spoke on recently is where they're not so interested in climbing that corporate ladder. They're actually protecting their mental health, recognizing if I get a position as a manager, that means I'm going to have to work more, maybe get paid more, but I'm actually doing more than I really want to be able to do. So I appreciate Gen Zs expressing their boundaries to
Hmm.
the employers and making sure that they're standing firm on the things that are important to them.
Final question. What are the long term
Yeah.
effects of micro retirement?
Long-term effects, I basically, as long as it's done in a very balanced way and it doesn't affect the employer's ability to do their job and to be profitable, I think it's going to be a great situation because you as an employer are expressing to your employee that you're sensitive if it's a legitimate concern and they need some time off and they're a good employee. I've told somebody, why would you not want a good employee to return after they've had it take quote unquote taken some self-care to for their mental health?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And good employees are hard to find, especially after we're coming out of COVID. At least in our area, it's
Yes.
very hard to find good employees. Paul Peters,
Yeah.
thank you so much. We sure appreciate the insight. Thank you so much.
You're totally